Guys, how you doing today? It's me once again with another video. What do you think of the classic rock bands like the Rolling Stones, Aerosmith, The Who, and others like Paul McCartney and AC/DC? Well, those bands, they have band members come and go, basically. Stu Sutcliffe, who was originally with the Beatles, who was replaced by Ringo Starr, and it would become the Fab Five: Paul McCartney, George Harrison, John Lennon, and Ringo Starr formed the Beatles in the early 1960s after performing their first show in Hamburg, Germany, and later before making their US debut on the Ed Sullivan Show in 1963. And after touring for at least for about 4 years until John Lennon uttered the word that the Beatles are greater than Jesus Christ. A press conference that he and his bandmates had made in India in 1967. And shortly after, the Beatles' popularity had fell apart. By 1969, it was over, and by 1970, Paul McCartney, George Harrison, Ringo Starr, and John Lennon became successful solo artists, and shortly after that, only Paul McCartney became one of the longest serving, became one of the best performers in rock and roll. I mean, he had performed shows after Paul McCartney and Wayne's was disbanded, and where he and his then wife, Linda Eastman, which she later became Linda McCartney. But after the death of John Lennon, and a couple of years after that, the death of George Harrison, and only Ringo Starr and Paul McCartney are the only two Beatles that are left today. The Who, when they were first formed in England, they were known as the Detours, later changing their name to The Who. Pete Townsend and Keith Moon and Roger Daltrey and John Entwistle formed one of the greatest and one of the loudest rock bands of all time, The Who. And then by September of 1978, Keith Moon died of a drug overdose, and the band went from there. They recruited a drummer from the Small Faces and was to tour from the tragedy in Cincinnati on December 1st, 1978, when a number of fans were trampled to death in Cincinnati, Ohio, up to the time of John Entwistle's death in 2002 in Las Vegas, Nevada. The Who performed for first responders at New York's Madison Square Garden in 2001. And still, the band is on tour. And even though that John Entwistle has since been replaced, there is the Bad Boys from Boston, Aerosmith. Joey Kramer, Steven Tyler formed one of the greatest rock bands of all time. Beginning in the mid-1970s, they would have a number of albums. They had drug problems as well. And shortly after, the band had just cleaned their act up. And Steven Tyler, of course, went country about a couple of years ago. And the other guys were looking for a replacement for Steven Tyler, even though that Steven Tyler had been a judge on American Idol, and they couldn't find a replacement for Steven Tyler. The band had released one EP about a few years ago, and after that, that was it. And the next is AC/DC. The guys that were formed in Australia in 1974 with Bon Scott. They would be one of the greatest rock bands of all time from Australia. And with Hell's Bells and other hits that AC/DC had released. And prior to after the death of Bon Scott in the early 1980s, the band was going to soldier on, but they got a brand new lead singer to replace him prior to after his death in the winter of 1980. Angus Young, sadly to say, is suffering from Alzheimer's as of 2017. No telling on how long the band's going to last, but speculations is that AC/DC will eventually go on well into the 21st century. Alright guys, that's it for this video. I would like to say thank you very much for watching this video. And please, like always, like, comment, subscribe. And until next time, see you around.